This is a bonus from Codependence Anonymous, CODA, book, Acceptance. As we break through our denial, we're better able to determine the degree of our problem. We recognize our denial as a symptom of codependence and see it as a process that continually emerges, subsides, and evolves throughout our lives. As we continue our recovery in CODA, we replace denial with acceptance. We progressively embrace our past and current life with honesty, openness, and a willingness to change. We move beyond denial and identify the harm our codependent decisions and behaviors have caused us personally, as well as our families, careers, physical health, and spirituality. We see how codependence has allowed us to become trapped in unhealthy situations and relationships. It affects every aspect of our lives. As we see our direction more clearly, we recognize that our journey is not advanced by force, or will, or intellect, or even strength of character. At some point, most of us acknowledge a higher power as the guide on our journey, the source of our progress. We may become more aware that we're on a spiritual journey. We know we're not alone when we accept our codependence. Together, we're learning how to love and be loved, and how to live life rather than merely survive it. Recovery in CODA is an ongoing process. It's a life that constantly challenges us. Recovery isn't earned like a merit badge. It's a way of living that evolves with us every day. The Serenity Prayer expresses our awareness that recovery is about living life as it unfolds. These simple phrases affirm that our recovery is lived one moment, one decision, one day at a time. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Some of us become nervous at the mention of spirituality and a higher power. Even if you've given up on a higher power or wonder if such a being exists, you are welcome to the program of Codependence Anonymous. This is not a religious program, but a spiritual one. It's a program for finding peace within. Over time, most everyone who makes a conscious choice to work this spiritual program decides what their higher power should be. With the help of a loving higher power, the program of Codependence Anonymous, and those who join us on this journey, each of us can experience the hope of recovery. We find willingness to change, grow, and evolve towards the positive, loving potential that lies within us. Through the guidance of our higher power, the program of Codependence Anonymous, and the CODA family, each of us can experience the hope of recovery and a life filled with peace and joy. The thing I like that they said here is that this is not a religious program. It's not religion, it's relationship. I just love that. Chapter 2, our spiritual dilemma. Codependence causes a dilemma to boil inside of us. For many of us, our pain and despair are signs of a deep inner need. This need, hunger, or desire gnaws at the core of our being. It could be a cry for unconditional love, respect, nurturing, acceptance, or joy. Many of us turn to other people, drugs, alcohol, or other addictions to fill this need to gain some sense of safety for our emotional well-being. Do I control others to relieve my fears? Do I let others control me for fear of their abuse or neglect? Do I adapt or change my behavior for others? Do I validate my value and worth as a person through them? Do I avoid others in order to feel safe? In CODA, we learn that our self-worth and well-being come from our higher power. When we attempt to codependency control or manipulate others, we turn ourselves into a higher power. We turn ourselves into little gods to maintain our sense of safety and well-being. When we codependently avoid others, as well as adapt or change our behaviors for others, we give them instead of our higher power this control and strength. As we turn ourselves into a higher power or give this power to others, we leave little room for our higher power to work in our lives. This is our spiritual dilemma. The following paragraph describes how our spiritual dilemma may involve control and avoidance, especially when circumstances become stressful. Controlling people and circumstances. Many of us take pride in controlling circumstances and those around us. If we think we might be abandoned, abused, or neglected by others, we label them as the problem and manipulate them. Specifically, we may over-control our mates, children, family members, friends, or associates by dominating them. Another way we control them is being too nice, passive, or quiet for long periods of time. Then when we fear or other feelings overwhelm us, we rage, isolate, or allow others to act out our feelings for us. We become a higher power when we control others to any degree, either quietly or aggressively. We may even reinforce or control with an attitude of arrogance, authority, or prejudice. We value others' beliefs and behaviors as foolish, selfish, or worthless. We establish ourselves in a better than position. Our way is the only way we think. In giving the power of our higher power to other people, we may seek others' approval. I'm going to change that word real quick just so it makes more sense. In giving the power of our God to other people, we may seek others' approval, often to the point of abandoning our own needs and desires. We live in fear of those we put in power. We dread their anger or disapproving looks. We fear their disappointment, avoidance, or control. In essence, we lose our sense of self or never gain it because we become obsessed with their attitudes and behaviors towards us, avoiding people and circumstances. Some of us may fear others so much that we avoid any degree of closeness or intimacy. We work hard to prevent placing ourselves in a vulnerable position. We become skilled at hiding our fears, especially when things seem out of control. We may remain silent even when we experience injustice or abuse. We may fall into martyr roles or act helpless to avoid confrontation or accountability. We may place ourselves in a subservient position and judge ourselves harshly. We may believe we're not acceptable enough to live a life with relationships, purpose, or happiness. Our codependence worsens, our fears and shame overwhelm us. We control and avoid others even more. But these behaviors are temporary fixes. Our fears always return and our shame is ever present. Many of us seek false gods. We numb our feelings with alcohol, drugs, food, sex, or work. These often turn into chronic addictions and compound our problems. None of them provide us freedom or peace. Regardless of whether we position ourselves as better than or less than, as a controller or avoider, we behave in self-centered ways. Equality is lost. What drives our needs to control and avoid others? Many of us ask, aren't some of these behaviors healthy? The answer can be found in the motivation for our behaviors. Our behaviors towards ourselves, others, and our higher power may be appropriate if they are by choice with healthy boundaries. For example, we may leave the premises of a person who is verbally or physically threatening us. We behave codependently, however, if we allow fear or shame to dictate our lives, causing us to rely on past survival instincts such as control and avoidance. Fear. For many of us, fear is our guardian. It helps protect us from harm. As codependents, we habitually use fear to protect ourselves from any opportunity of being shamed by others. Our fear may be cloaked in anger or resentment, rage, pain, or loneliness. Oftentimes, our passivity, silence, manipulation, isolation, rage, violence, denial, or even deceit are our expressions of fear. Other feelings that show up as fear are concern, anxiety, nervousness, and feeling uptight or scared. Shame. Shame causes us to believe we are less than, stupid, foolish, worthless, inadequate, or unwanted. It diminishes our true sense of identity and destroys our belief that we are loving human beings. It erodes our self-esteem and sense of equality in the world. Experiencing fear and shame as children. As children, our identity as well as our relationships with our higher power, ourselves and others, were damaged. Each time we were abused or neglected, we felt shame and naturally feared its reoccurrence. Yet, we allowed our sense of self-worth and well-being to be shaped by those who abused and neglected us as children. We had no choice. As we continued to experience abuse or neglect, our fear and shame intensified. We gave more of ourselves away, over time, most often without our knowing it. Our abusers became our higher power. They became our God. We learned to fear their authority. As the abuse and neglect continued, the possibility of developing an emotionally fulfilling relationship with ourselves, others, and our higher power or our God diminished. We learned survival skills in order to cope. We controlled or avoided potentially violated. We learned survival skills in order to cope. We controlled or avoided potentially volatile circumstances. We cast away our childhood, tried to become little adults, or rebelled. Many of us didn't understand our actions because they were often instinctive. Over time, we learned how to alleviate our fear and shame by controlling and or avoiding ourselves and others. When we felt overwhelmed or stressed out, we relied on what we knew best to survive. In this devastating codependent cycle, we took greater control of life, allowing less room for a power greater than ourselves to work through us. Continuing this behavior as adults without some form of help, we carry these emotional conflicts and survival patterns into our adult lives. We hope to find peace and happiness and leave the past behind, but instead we recreate similar or opposite circumstances in our adult relationships. Neither extreme is healthy. We unknowingly transfer the characteristics and power of our childhood abusers to significant people in our lives today. Sometimes we transfer abusive characteristics to our higher power too. So in essence, we think that God, our higher power, is abusive as well. In our adult relationships, we fearfully guard against any sign of shame, abuse, or neglect. We become manipulative or avoid other people and circumstances. This fear can grow stronger than the shame itself. It forms a shaky foundation for relationships. We continue to draw others near us, hoping for intimacy, but when they get too close, we push them away because of our fear of shame. Building our own concept of a higher power. Many of us participate in organized religions or learn various doctrines and concepts of God or a higher power. Some of us may hope to cleanse our sense of shame by living righteous lives, so we try to be perfect. Even controlled behaviors change, combined with our religious beliefs, are not enough. Our motives may be virtuous, but we're still emotionally bound to the abusive, neglectful people in our lives, most deeply to those from our childhood. Some of us are atheists or agnostics. Organized religion may remind us of an abusive, authoritarian God. Some of us may be angry at our higher power for the negative experiences we faced, or we may discover we've been angry at this higher power for years but didn't know it. Some of us believe we're undeserving of God's love or grace. We must ask ourselves, is my life filled with honesty and sincerity? Am I working toward a safe, healthy, and loving relationship with my higher power for myself and others? Most often we say no. Our fear and shame drive us to behave in devastating ways. Wherever our codependent course takes us, we find we're left with no other recourse than to seek a safe power greater than ourselves, one that can restore us to sanity. To continue recovery, we must become willing to consider this endeavor. If we haven't experienced a higher power before, our concepts of a safe being can begin to take shape. If we already have a relationship with God, we can help strengthen it. Whatever our past beliefs, we can begin building a spiritual foundation for our program of recovery, beginning the journey of recovery from codependence. In our codependence, we excessively place our faith and hope in ourselves, our mates, our children, our relatives, and our friends, even our careers and lifestyles. We do this for our safety, value, worth, and well-being. In recovery, we learn to build faith and hope and progressively surrender our lives to the care of a loving higher power. We learn to let go of our controlling and avoidance behaviors, to resolve our feelings about what we do, and to emotionally detach from those on whom we compulsively rely. Some of us gladly reach for our higher power's hand, some of us reach in desperation, and some of us realize that our ability to trust anyone or anything has been so greatly diminished that it may take time. We may need to feel some sense of safety. We may have to act as if we have faith until it becomes our reality. Many of us pray or meditate when our fear is so overwhelming that we're unable to surrender even a small part of our will or lives to our higher power. Oftentimes, we allow only a simple prayer such as, "God, please help me find the willingness to let go." As we continue our recovery, many of us can surrender more easily to our higher power and experience this power's heartfelt presence within us. Surrendering and letting go doesn't mean that life's circumstances will happen the way we want. It means we're better able to accept life as it is and handle problems with a newfound strength from our higher power. This enables us to experience a growing personal empowerment and a humble yet truer self. We learn that our higher power doesn't create bad people. Goodness dwells within us all, even those responsible for the broken promises and betrayals, abuses, hurts, and fears of our past. It's possible to love these persons yet not condone their negative behaviors. We can even love and forgive ourselves in our own way. We're all learning how to love and be loved. Even with our higher power's help, none of us loves or lives life perfectly. Our humanity continues to evolve. We begin to realize that perfectionism is merely an illusion. Over the long haul, we make many mistakes and at times slip into our former codependent behaviors. When we're unable to maintain our emotional balance, strength, or self-esteem, we reflect on the work we must do and that recovery is a lifelong process. We remember that comparing our progress with others is self-defeating. Each of us is learning at our own balance and pace. To keep our relationship with our higher power in perspective, we find it helpful to prioritize our relationships. Our relationship with our higher power must come first. Once we establish and begin to develop this relationship, we're better able to develop one with ourselves. As the relationships with our higher power and ourselves gain in strength and balance, we begin to heal and develop loving relationships with others. When we accept a healthier priority for our close relationships, we allow our higher power to work in our lives. We draw on strength that far exceeds our own. As we continue to strengthen our relationship with our higher power throughout our recovery, our overwhelming tiredness, depression, anxiety, despair, and hopelessness are replaced with an increasing strength and resiliency. Step by step, our fear of shame diminishes. Our childhood wounds and feelings progressively heal. We experience richer encounters of prayer and meditation, and it becomes easier to let go of our control and avoidance behaviors and to allow our higher power to guide our life's journey. The miracles of recovery unfold. Loving relationships with our higher power, ourselves, and others improve and evolve. We begin to feel more assured that our deepest needs will be cared for. We don't turn as often to other people or to an unhealthy lifestyle to satisfy our spiritual hunger. Like the light of dawn, our higher power's will radiates through us with reassurance and trust. And I heard something the other day, and this is the end of the chapter, that when we let fear rule our lives, fear becomes our God. When we let fear rule our lives, safety and predictability becomes our God. And I thought that was really good and went right in alignment with codependency.